this is my own form of personal reparations. So, as I mentioned earlier, I took my daughter to Africa when she was 7. I assumed personal responsibility for teaching her history and culture. So my daughter has been self-employed since she was 8 years old. Once she published her first book, she has traveled throughout the United States, traveled to Europe, speaking. So since my daughter was 8 years old, she's been making $200 an hour. So I'm teaching her that she doesn't have to go to school to learn how to get a job. I've taught her that she is a job. My daughter now works for me. She is now the program director for our Cultural Imperative program, which is a national program. She's developed a curriculum where we're now working we're in 20 cities. We'll be in 20 cities by the end of this year, where we have hundreds of high school students who meet once a month and who are reading my first book from the Browder file, having intelligent conversations about the information that they're learning and writing reflection papers so that they can now internalize what they have read and begin to see themselves with new eyes. So this is part of a larger program that we've been involved in, and this is my form of reparations. I'm not expecting the United States to do nothing for me that I can't do for myself. If they do happen to decide to give us some funds, then I know exactly what I'm going to do with that money, where I'm going to invest it. I've never bought a new car in my life. Don't need a new car, right? I'm about investing my money in people who look like me, investing my money in my projects so that I can expand what I'm doing and take it to the next level.
I love that a lot. And everybody who actually watches drboycetv.com, I want you guys to know last night, God sent me a message and I had to share it at 3 o'clock in the morning. And what I did was I put together what I consider to be your personal reparations plan. So I tell you, this is a reminder, man, that well, you know what, I feel so confirmed and validated when I talk to someone like you, an older brother, not a father figure, but an older brother figure, because you're not that old. You're younger and healthier than most people I know. But I love it when you say something and I think, oh my gosh, I was thinking the same thing. And I like the fact that you talk about us giving ourselves reparations. And so literally last night before this conversation happened, I said, you know, I think I have the basics of a personal reparations plan. It was more financially oriented, but I literally listed 5 things that your family can do right now that will make sure that you and your family are good in a generation or less. Those 5 things, or even on a basic level, you and your family will be good. Just go to drboycetv.com. The videos, maybe 3 or 4 videos down, but just all you gotta do is type in Boyce Watkins reparations and look for videos I've made in the last couple of days. You can filter by that and you can find it there as well. So you remember, reparations, the best reparations are the ones that are homemade. Reparations are best homemade.
Exactly.
We're waiting on your oppressor to make you well. That's actually a scary concept, actually.
Yeah, it ain't gonna happen. It's not going to happen. If you know anything at all about American history, America would never give black people anything that would be of value to black folk. If they give you something, it's going to be more beneficial to white folk in the long run. So that's just American history 101.
Yep, that's right. That's right. History tells us everything we need to know, and that's why people like yourself are so important. Because so many of us just don't know history. Not even just black people. I mean, even some white folks, if they knew history, they wouldn't behave the way they behave. I bet the majority of the people who love Fox News don't know history. They don't know what America has done to black and brown people all over the globe. So they walk around with this American exceptionalism and these false ideas of what it means to be a good person, and it's ridiculous. But I want to ask you, speaking of history. Let me ask you this: you mentioned yourself as a person who has access to secrets, who's finding information that the rest of us don't have, and you are, in my opinion, the world's leading expert on Egypt. You might not consider yourself to be number one, but in my mind, you're number one. There's nobody else. So can you give us maybe a 2 or 3 fast facts we can walk away with that we should know about Egypt's role in shaping society around the world and things that we were never taught in school?
Sure. Well, first of all, most of what we know about Egypt is wrong. Most of what we know about Egypt has been given to us by conquerors of Egypt. First of all, Egypt is in Africa. Egypt is in Northeast Africa. It's part of the African continent. Egypt is a Greek name. Pyramid is a Greek name. Sphinx is a Greek name. So most of the names of ancient Egyptian people, places, and things have been named by non-African people. So our first order of duty is to recover the original African names of African people, places, and things. And once you do that, it changes everything. So the original name of the country is Kemet, not Egypt. Kemet is a word that means the nation of the black people, not the black soil, as National Geographic or the Discovery Channel would tell us, but the way that that word is written with the determinatives of a person means the land of the black people and not the black land. So Kemet is the oldest documented civilization known to mankind. So as Lynn Jeffries often said, whoever controls the history of Kemet controls the history of the world. So we have examples of government. The first system of government known to mankind was developed in Kemet. The first system of architecture, the oldest building ever created, is still standing in Africa today. It's the Step Pyramid designed by Imhotep, the world's first multi-genius. The first civil servants, if you will. The first physicians in history, the first dentists in history, the first gynecologists, the first engineers, the first hydrologists, the first social scientists, the first psychologists. All of this developed first in the Nile Valley. And Kemet is nothing but an extension of cultures and civilizations that developed further up south. The Nile River flows from the south to the north, right? So following the progression of the Nile River, the culture flowed. The Nile River is a cultural highway. So the culture flowed out of Ethiopia via the Blue Nile into Sudan, or what was known originally as Kush. Those civilizations are older than Kemet. They're older than Kemet, but white folk never talk about that. James Reisner, who was the director of the taught history at Harvard and at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Reisner was the foremost authority on excavations in Kush, and there are over 500 pyramids in Kush. There's 118 in Egypt. There are more pyramids in Kush than there are in Egypt, and so we know based on documentation that hieroglyphics is a Greek word. Medu Neter is the original African term for that writing form. Systems of kingship and government and the so-called gods of Egypt, they originated from Kush, further south, Kush and Ethiopia, right? So all of this information tells a story of African people before there was civilization in Europe, thousands of years before there was civilization in Europe. So by the time Greece came on the scene around 850 BC, Kemet was already 3,000 years old. Mm. The people of Kemet had libraries, had great temples, had built pyramids and monuments that the world today cannot replicate. Rome came into existence around 750. So the essence of European/American history and culture is rooted in Greco-Roman history and culture, which was established at least 3,000 years after African history and culture. Let me give you something else, put some things in context. There's, at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, there's an exhibit that talks about the origins of mankind. And in this exhibit, it says that Africans have lived on this planet for at least 300,000 years. Humanity began in Africa. 300,000 years ago, the first Homo sapiens sapiens lived in Africa alone, in East Africa, near Kenya and Ethiopia. And that beginning around 60,000 years ago, a group of Africans walked east out of Africa and populated Asia and ultimately populated the world. And then approximately 30,000 years ago, another group of these same Africans walked west into Europe and populated Europe. So if you just process those two bits of information, the first people in Asia and the Americans were not Asians or Americans, they were Africans who had migrated to those land masses over a period of tens of thousands of years. The first people in Europe were not white folk, they were Africans. And based on genetic research that was done just recently, just within the past 4 years, geneticists have determined when those Africans who have been in Europe for at least let's say 34,000 years, when those Africans lost their melanin and mutated and became people now classified as Caucasian. That mutation occurred 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. All right? Now just process that. If Africans have been on the planet as Homo sapiens sapiens, man with a consciousness and with the consciousness that they have consciousness, that's Homo sapiens sapiens. We possess this ability for 300,000 years. Europeans have only been on the planet 7,000 to 8,000 years, which means at the least we have a 292,000 year head start on white folk. That's a fact. So when you know that, and when you look at our historical record, which exists, that's the stolen legacy. That's the narrative of those people who came before Columbus. That is what is not taught in school systems. And that is what we have the capacity to learn now just by doing what our great-great-great-grandparents were not allowed to do. That is, read and write. All of this information has been written down somewhere. It's in libraries. It's in books. And if you cultivate a love affair with reading, you can begin to access information that your oppressor will never expose you to. As a matter of fact, it's not your oppressor's job to mentally free you, to educate you. That's not their job. That's our responsibility. And when we know who we are, what we do is every person has an obligation to do, to know yourself, to know your history, to know your ancestry, to know the best and the worst of your people so that you know what to do and, more importantly, you know what not to do. And with that knowledge, you can live and function successfully in a racially charged environment, in a hateful environment. You know, America is probably more hate-filled now than it has been at any point in time in our lives, brother. But despite all the hatred, I can still navigate in America because I know who I am. I know what to do to protect myself. You mentioned, you know, when you saw Brother Nuri and I on the plane, you were worried. I'm not worried about that because I understand how the universe works. I understand how ancestors will plug into people who are doing good work and how they will protect you. They will make sure that your vessel is protected, is healthy, so that you can continue to do the work so that they can express themselves to you. So that's a reality that your oppressor will never teach you about. Your oppressor nor your oppressor's religions will ever teach you the truth about who you are as a person and what your relationship is with the creative source, which some people call God, others call Allah, others call Jehovah. All of these concepts sprang from the minds of African people first, who've had a longer relationship with the creative force than any other people on the planet, who know these ancestors better than anybody on the planet. So when we know ourselves, when we're comfortable with ourselves and allow ourselves to be the vessels to which these ancestors will speak and do their best work, there is nothing that you can't do. That's how the universe functions.
Wow. Wow.